All right. Let's go ahead and see if we are locked and loaded. Yet again, since we are not at my place this weekend, I am just going to rock and roll with these shows the old-fashioned way of not doing behind the paywall show or anything. As we look at Pocono's race today, let me go ahead and bring up our dashboards. We can go ahead and kind of walk through what some of the fundamentals that we want to focus on for this Pocono race are. The fact that today's grid is, let me make sure that this is going to load for me on Restream here. How'd you guys do yesterday with Corey Hunt blowing the tire late in the race, dude? Nothing's more frustrating than all the pivots that I used for like Dawson Sutton, like outscored him, through and through, and then Corey blows has the tire go down at the end. That was big annoying and very, 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 very frustrating. Let me go ahead and move this here. So as we go ahead and take a look at that entire screen here. Again, sorry, only rocking with my laptop. Yep. All right, cool. Actually, let me make sure my audio is working today. Right. Okay. Yeah. Cool. We're all good to go. As we look through this race, obviously we look back at the last few Xfinity Series races, and recently we have not had a ton of DNFs. The last 2 years that we've been here, the prior years before that, 8, 5, and 7, and then 5 mechanical DNFs, 2 mechanical DNFs. So really, this race could go either way on the volatility factor in terms of people leading. We're seeing that we're pretty much going to have at least 7 leaders in some form or fashion, with people either pitting before the end of the stage or just passing, specifically with the the difference that the draft offers, with people being able to pass them and everything. The tracks that Astukas wanted to bring up were Indianapolis and Pocono, as they are the most similar in terms of the aspects that we're using in order to look at how potential contests can play out and what they can end up scoring. But what I want to specifically look at is where these laps led and fast laps are coming from. This is yet again the dominator statistics you can find on our website under the, obviously, we have tons of tools and stuff, but we have dashboards for all of the series, the contest review, that people have been very adamant on being pretty much the best CSV and contest reviewer across the board, just with all the things we can do. And then obviously our lap-by-lap analyzer for our races. You can get access to that through any of the subscriptions that we have in the link in the description below if you just go to TrueDFS and want to join our membership. Anyway, going back to when we're looking specifically at the amount of laps led. Now, we did have 2 runaway races in 2019 and 2020, or 2019 and 2023, with 58 and 51 laps being led by Barry and Custer. Outside of that, your main dominators in these races and stuff have not necessarily ran away. I mean, we do have another 43 lap runaway here with Gregson going from 9th to 1st here, but we're looking at anywhere in the range of your major lap leaders, really having anywhere between 18 to 30, possibly 35 laps. And if it's outside of that, it's very much in the 50 range and stuff. When we're looking at the grid today, and especially with where people are at in terms of raw speed, the reason I'm bringing this stuff up, we're looking at this one specifically, is when we do look at the people who were able to lead laps in these races, it was individuals who actually showed really, really decent speed in practice, and they were able to get through the field. And so they're like seeing these numbers in terms of, this race is 100 laps, and we're seeing instances to where, 24, 25, 43, 8, 11, 27, and 26, and even 11% of these races are being led by people who didn't necessarily start up in the front of the field. That gives cadence and very much realistic outcomes to the faster guys in practice. Justin Allgaier and Connor Zilic specifically, and specifically Connor Zilic at 9,700, the man who has had very, very, very good runs. I mean, obviously not just the road courses, but in general, and then has ran into a ton of bad luck at the end of the race. It's very similar to what Corey Heim has experienced as well. There's been a lot of instances to where Connor Zilisch probably should end up winning races, and he just didn't end up doing that. And so when we're looking at potential lap leaders and stuff in this race, I actually really like Connor Zilisch and Justin Allgaier to end up leading the most amount of laps and fight for the win in this race much more than anybody up here in the rest of the top 10. If we're not, just kind of getting close to talking through things, if I'm not prioritizing Allgaier and Connor Zilisch, when we're looking at where Chase Elliott and Brandon Jones fall in line at, I just don't think Chase Elliott is going to be able to do enough with the amount of place differential that we do have from certain individuals who are more expensive, like Carson Hocevar at 85. Yet again, with Zilisch being under 10K, I just think from a point per dollar aspect and from a value aspect, I'm much more likely to not chase after Chase Elliott today at 10.7. I mean, we have 100 laps. If we're expecting at least, obviously we look through and, we have, 8 leaders in these other races, but that includes, stage leaders and people leading, technically at any given point in the race. I think we end up seeing probably more cycling of the lead today than probably a normal Pocono race, just due to the fact of how really consistent that Connor and Justin were in terms of their raw speed, and the fact that you just get these massive runs, especially on these restarts. We saw it yesterday, and even in previous races. If the fastest car is not in first, they are not only susceptible. Not only are they able to realistically lose the lead by a faster car passing on the inside, but they can very easily go from first to third to fourth within one lap. And so I think that actually hinders Jones, Nicholas Sanchez, William Sawalich, and Ryan Sieg to a pretty significant extent. So, as stated, I'm not necessarily chasing after Elliott at 10.7. I think that's a very expensive price tag for him with what is being given in this race. But Chase Elliott and Connor Zilisch and Allgaier seem to be the only guys that I could realistically envision and project to be your highest DraftKings scores by the end of this race. As we continue to go through and look at other things to note at these races, and I want to go ahead and look at the place differential really fast. Now, we aren't seeing a ton of place differential here. If anything, it's the major opposite of where we've seen a lot of situations to where really good cars have ended up having really, really bad days. And obviously, this Harrison Burton is finishing poorly and stuff. But this is actually a situation where there's a lot of negative place differential from what I would view as people who are Nicholas Sanchez, William Sawalich, Ryan Sieg, guys up here, and even potentially even somebody like Sam Mayer at 10,000. Realistically, he's not going to be anywhere near paying off that price tag because he's going to need 50 points. And so we actually see a pretty significant almost increase of a lot of negative place differential coming from guys up front in these races, whereas we don't really see a lot of place differential at Pocono because, if qualifying goes in or if qualifying happens, we're not going to have good cars start in the back of the field. It's a very, run what you run type of race. If you have a bad engine program, if you have a bad aero program, like you're going to start in the back of the field. And so, Hattori, on like one-offs with, Timmy Hill and stuff. Josh Berry, when he was racing with Jordan Anderson in 2021, are like the biggest, kind of, big names in the back of the field. Really outside of that, like we're not seeing major guys coming from like the second half of the field. And so the reason I brought this up is I'm actually very concerned about a lot of people actually underperforming based on where they started in this field, whether that be, we see a lot of Joe Gibbs cars up here. We see a lot of good cars up here, but it's more related to, who the driver is, Yet again, I think the biggest example of that today is probably William Sawalich in a Joe Gibbs car who has been pretty fucking horrible. He's starting fourth today. I would not be shocked to see him fall into that category of losing a lot of place differential in these races. Lastly, on this, we're just not seeing huge gains and stuff. I mean, obviously we have like, some races here, when we have, somebody starting the 20s and stuff, which is very much realistic of where Carson Quaffle is today. But I'm not really going to want to be chasing a ton of place differential outside of, the obvious, like, Carson Quaffle here. So what do we do from there? Where else are things, expecting to go? And, as stated, normally, we look at the scoring ranges today, pretty standard in line. Realistically, got to be scoring near 40, if not mid 40s, to really be considered on a slate like this, due to the fact that we're not seeing a ton of place differential. And now, as stated, this has shown situations where there are wreck fests in these races, but I would very much rather lean today towards playing guys based on what their realistic finish position is versus chasing place differential and hoping that we have a ton of chaos and wrecks today. So what does that necessarily mean? For me, when we look at we can even look at track performance as well, but the Xfinity Series changes so many people over the course of a season and stuff and different rides. I actually want to look at, where people are at this year. And when you look at the average speed rank of pretty much the intermediate tracks this year that we're looking at, Connor Zilic, Allgaier top of the board, Sam Mayer, Hill, Love, Creed, Jones, Taylor Gray, Nicholas Sanchez, C, Quaffle, Sammy Smith, Justin, Harrison Burton is in that order. If you want to go through the rest, obviously, you can do this on your own. But what that's showing to me is I'm personally probably going to be a lot more heavy on the top half of the field. Now, obviously, if I need a value or whatever, it's going to be whoever shows up best. I haven't ended up making my lineups yet. I'm going to just defer to what my projections indicate. So it's probably going to be somebody like Josh Balicki at 56, or just whoever is being used to put people in there, right? But I'm very much interested in people in the top half of the field, and specifically when we look at the speed that Harrison Burton has had, starting 16th at $6,900. When we look at where he's at in this, I mean he's obviously average speed rank of 15th, average finish 11.8, medium finish at 9.5. I think Harrison Burton makes quite a lot of sense today, especially combined with what his price tag is and what his practice speeds were indicating. So I really, really like Harrison Burton. The fact that, I'm expecting to do a 5K plus Harrison Burton leaves me a lot of range to play a lot of the 7 and 8K range options here. And so that's people like Sammy Smith, it's people like Eckes, it's people like, as stated, Harrison Burton and stuff. But I'm probably going to be more aggressive on playing top half of the field guys than normal here, because I would lean towards this race hopefully being greener than those races that we saw that has 8 DNFs, 7 DNFs and stuff like that. If it ends up going green, Quaffle should be competing for a top 12, top 13 finish. Even Justin, coming from the Wheel and Modified series, this is going to be, I don't normally bring in driver history and stuff just because everybody runs either fucking late models or whatever now. Everybody's racing, but when we look at what Justin can potentially do in this Joe Gibbs car starting 17th, the fact that he's just there on speed alone has the potential of him, hitting a 4.8, 4.9, potentially 5K value. Yet again, when we're looking at people who can realistically hit 40 points a day as like a baseline, there's a lot of people in the top 20 that I'm very interested in today. We can go ahead and wander on over to SaberSim and try and get an idea of where lineups can potentially go. And yet again, thank you for the 48 you guys joining me this morning here. So I look at SaberSim. Now, as I said, I haven't made stuff yet. I'm just kind of goofing around with what they're doing. This is their, trying to understand what the field is going to do. So personally, this is their, when we're looking at the result or, the raw sim result. Yet again, my main focus of each year is how do I potentially take down, 1 to 2 to 3, contests a year for the last 3 years, I've been able to do that in NASCAR, and then obviously, throw in any NBA or NFL week that I win or whatever, right? That's how I make my living. So I'm not really concerned about consistently cashing over a week in and week out basis. It's just chasing, how do I potentially hit the optimal lineup? I'm really concerned with Jeremy Clements. I'm really concerned with Ryan Ellis. Even the fact that Parker Retzlaff, when we look at 2311, when we look at Alpha Beta Prime Racing, obviously Pool's been doing well. Mason Massey's back here, but he's been underperforming, or really outside the fact that one race, I believe the Las Vegas race he performed well at, and then there was another race he was in that he wasn't even on the DK player list, and he would have scored if he was around his 5K average. He would have ended up scoring like 35 points or whatever. But Mason Massey has been underperforming, and the reason I'm bringing up Parker Retzlaff is Parker's had some abysmal weeks right now, and not only has he had abysmal weeks, like he's destroyed the car. Whether it's an intermediate car, whether it's last week in Mexico when he plowed into the wreck. I mean, that's a lot for Alpha Beta Prime Racing, and so when I'm looking at drivers that I'm kind of hesitant to play, especially when they're like kind of being indicated by like SaberSim here, like I understand why they're low owned, but personally, I want to see how Parker performs, moving forward, since these alpha guys have ran into so many issues with cars and really having to repair a lot of their field. If your name wasn't Pool, you've left these races with damaged cars and stuff. But when we're looking at kind of where the field is going to be, and let's see, yet again, this is using SaberSim stuff, not my stuff, because I'd like to try and get a an independent feel of where the field is going to be, and then I can use like my stuff to try and figure out if I want to hedge or be different or whatever the case may be. I'm really not seeing anything out of the ordinary from a cash perspective or a cash rate that I haven't really talked about. I think about the only one popping up right now is Dean Thompson that I haven't talked about. I don't really have an opinion past that, but it seems to me like ownership is pretty much going to be where it should be on a lot of people. I think today, very similar to something like, yesterday, for example, and I'm just using that not because it happened in the truck series, but similar to how people are going to build. Carson Kvapil, obviously the most expensive guy because he started in 22nd, in a race that has 100 laps, $8,500 is going to be there. The main difference in where I'm going to go that I'm not going to fret too much is it seems like Connor Zilic is not going to be played nearly as much. It seems like the field is going to go Carson Kvapil, Allgaier, and potentially Chasen Elliott and stuff. Whereas I'm very much okay, being underweight on Elliott, thinking that I think Allgaier and I think Connor Zilic can end up leading the field. That's really my main differences to what I think the field is going to do. And yet again, just talking through, how I'm going to approach stuff or what avenues I'm going to take. I think you can realistically be underweight on Elliott because I think there's faster cars in the field on the long run that are going to potentially be there. The other thing to note is if you are playing Chase Elliott, I really would highly prioritize Connor Zilic over Justin Allgaier today. You have much more freedom in your lineups from a salary perspective. I think Allgaier and Connor Zilic are like the same exact play. And the fact that Connor Zilic is drastically cheaper than Allgaier, I think that just makes, from a leverage perspective, way more sense. But really past that, I'm defaulting to my projections. And that's those are the guys that I'm going to use, or at least playing stuff. I'm going to see if you guys are saying anything, which I don't really see at the moment. But yeah, that's basically where I'm at. Nothing really out of the ordinary in practice. I think practice is especially, not only the regular laps, right? But or when we look at each individual laps, but thankfully the entire field did a 5-lap average pretty much outside of the guys in the back. And I think today, for example, because obviously I don't believe Jones and some of them ran 10 laps, but if you look at everybody's individual laps and really look at the averages of those, and then also combine them with where everybody's at in the 5-lap averages and stuff, I think that's going to be the main indicator, of where everybody should be in this race, which yet again is why I'm very hesitant on playing a lot of guys in the back of the field. I think their only realistic chance, like if there's more than outside of Carson Kvapil starting 22nd, I would be really shocked if there's more than 3 guys in the optimal lineup that starts outside of the top 20 today, because that would indicate that there was a lot of carnage and wrecks today. Outside of that, just looking at how, and Alfredo, I do want to mention Alfredo as well, because he's $6,700. He's probably going to be, outside of Carson Kvapil, the most owned guy back in the back of the field. Outside of a value, as I said, if I need somebody cheaper, Josh Bilicki is probably my favorite. But really, since you have Carson Kvapil and Anthony Alfredo starting 28th, with Alfredo, up and down on their equipment or whatever, but hey, they actually got through a fucking practice on the queue without destroying the car. I would be really shocked if there's really anybody else back there competing to be optimal today, because like I said, that would just indicate we needed a lot of wrecks and stuff. So I really like, the field from 8th to, 17th. I think I'm going to try and fit in as many of these guys as possible who can migrate into the top 10, and then just walk themselves into anywhere from like a 42 to a potentially like 47 point day. I'm not really concerned about what their value is. I just want the raw points. As we've looked through, and we can even do that really fast here to we can even do that here as we look through the different races, which yet again, this is the way that you can use this. And so many tabs open. Give me a moment here. We can go ahead and look at these races and kind of see where these guys are scoring or where everybody's scoring on an individual level really fast. I mean, obviously we look through the regular. Let's do this. All right, dude. Let's get rid of 25. We'll look back at the last 3. And you can get the point. You can do this on your own. Okay, so when we look back at last year's race, right, we end up going 90 laps. Look at the race results here, and whenever I'm looking back at races, I just personally always look at the starting grid and then just seeing where people scored. I mean, obviously you can launch it by DraftKings points or whatever, but I just end up like looking at the starting grid of where people are at. But even here, you look at the fall off in this race, 66, 55, 49, 45, 43, 41, like not at this point, we're chasing raw DraftKings points and not like value. Like we just need to try and hit as many people up here as possible, right? Really good mid-race scoring. That was lap 90, so we're going to look at lap 89 here. Final caution 85, so we'll do 84. And we look at where people are scoring at this point, or at this junction here. Obviously, these are the people who have ran issues or whatever. We look at the ranking and stuff, and still, even under a green flag condition, before the race is technically over, we still have a pretty big drop off with, your 8th guy at 41, and then like we're just trying to fit in as many people here as possible, right? We look back at, let's go look at 23. All right, so seems like we went into overtime here. Let's see here, end of the race DraftKings points. Let's just see kind of where we're at here. A lot of place differential here. Potentially could have been a race that did not have qualifying, just based on the names starting in the back of the field. So we see a much higher increase in the DraftKings points at the end of this race compared to one, because like why is Riley, Austin Hill, Chase Elliott, all these guys starting outside of the top 10? Kind of fishy. Maybe not. Maybe went green. But just looking through and trying to get an idea of what the end game of these races are going to look like. All right, so yet again, another one here to where much more realistic. Oh my God, this is a Brandon Brown race. Holy Toledo. This one goes all the way down. You know, we're not seeing outside of 40 until the top 12. Very, very interesting. I'll see what you guys are saying if anything is being brought up past that. Byron. Well, I'm busy watching the Austin Major. We'll worry about these idiots in the Cup Series later. I'm busy rooting for Vitality in Austin right now. Let's see. Outside of that, I don't think I really have anything else to talk about. If you guys do have any questions or whatever, you can always message me in Discord. Yeah, past that, I can't really think of anything else. Here's my juggling picture. That's my Twitter profile. But yeah, I'll see you guys later. Thank you for watching. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.